welcome to the Valley View with your host Ken Adams, and this week I'm joined by Larry Trott, who's running for House District 19. So welcome to the show, Larry.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks for having me.
And why did you decide to run for public office? I always ask people this question because it's sometimes very interesting as to why people do run.
Yeah, I'm sure there are a number of stories. I actually ran a number of years ago, probably about 12 years ago, for the Salem-Keizer School Board, and I was not successful in that race, but came close. But as a result of that, I was able to get a seat on the Willamette Education Service District Board, where I've been serving for the past 10 years. And I did a couple years as chair and was just recently reelected as chair. So that's been a really gratifying experience, and we've done some very good things there. So when I thought about this race, I thought that this is something that I have with my background. I have a degree in law, and I was a prior district attorney. I've been on the school board for a number of years, of the Service District Board, I'm sorry, for a number of years, and worked with Marion Polk Food Share, and been involved in organizations that deal with a lot of the issues that are confronting us at this time. And I just thought, well, you know, I've got the skill sets and the desire to deal with those issues, and so I thought this is a good time to run for state representative.
So what are some of those issues? Because that's really what I think voters need to be aware of. What issues are important to you, and how do you see yourself dealing with these issues?
Well, so I've haven't made any bones about some of the issues that I'm involved with. I have worked at the Oregon Lottery for the past almost 20 years, mostly in the director's office there. And one of the big issues I see there is the state's reliance on lottery funding, particularly that money that comes from video lottery. And the video lottery, I think, is a big issue for the state. The amount of social problems that it causes, the amount of the amount of revenue that leaves this state that we have to use to pay for video lottery terminals and those kind of things. And I just don't think the benefit to the state is worth the cost. And so that's a big issue for me. But a couple of the other ones are tied to the very groups that I've talked about earlier. I was asked to be the statewide director for the Governor's State Employees Food Drive back in 2003. And as a result of that, I became very close to food and nutritional issues, and discovered that at the time, we were the 49th worst state in the country for food insecurity, only ahead of Mississippi. And in the years since then, I think we progressed up to 47. So we're still one of the worst in the country. In terms of education, graduation rates in the state we're about the 46th worst. We're also one of the worst states in the country as far as transparency is concerned from the government. So those are all issues near and dear to me, and I felt with my background and what we've done with the Marion Polk Food Share in this community and addressing some of the hunger issues, as well as what we've done over at the Willamette Education Service District Board, I could bring those skills to the State House and apply those to the problems that I think are, you know, acutely present here in the state.
Well, actually, I subbed at a lot of schools when I first moved here to Oregon almost 10 years ago. And that was one of the things that really caught me by surprise, were how many kids were getting their breakfast and their lunch through the school, and how many kids were getting, you know, free lunches and free breakfast. But it just surprised me and startled me at various schools that I went to. In fact, I would say it was the majority of the students in most of the schools that I subbed at.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, because last night I was in an event sponsored by Salem City Club and League of Women Voters, and one of my friends came to that, and his name's Rick Kimball, and he has been on the Salem-Keizer School Board for a number of years, having served as chair for some time. But we were having a conversation after the event was over, and talking about the fact that more than half of the students, just over half the students in the Salem-Keizer School District are below the poverty line. So, and obviously those free lunch programs are part of that.
You know, that's hard to understand. I've never seen this before. Is this a trend not just in Oregon, or is this something that seems to be more Oregon-centric?
Well, you know, it's hard for me to speak to the rest of the
Okay.
country because I'm not as deeply familiar, but it is a growing problem. You know, just generally nationally, I can speak to that, and but but very much a big issue right here in the city of Salem. I don't think a lot of people are aware of that fact.
Well, I certainly, because I didn't sub in the Salem-Keizer district, I didn't know that that was also a problem here. But if poverty's that severe, I would say that there's other problems going on then, as far as income distribution, say, and the ability of residents to get good-paying family jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something the other day I was reading about, talking about the major cause of poverty is the fact that there are not, just the wages aren't there. So I think, and the state is working to address that fact, but that's a big cause of poverty. And in that vein, homelessness. Homelessness is a big issue here. I know when we've been walking houses that, you know, I ran into a couple here. They weren't married, but they were good friends, and I think friends because they had been homeless together. And one gentleman had been just gotten off the streets after 7 years. He was 68 years old, and since he was 61 until then, had been living on the streets. And then his friend, she said she had just escaped homelessness because her son had let her put up a tent in his backyard. So, but they have so little income coming in, and there's so little affordable housing out there that you know, that's just a major problem. And again, the one that I'm sure we're all confronted by that as you drive down the street and you see the people that are out there.
But at that age, it's hard to be living out in the street. I mean, that takes a toll on you to live out in the street, especially at, I mean, like 68.
Yeah, I was listening to a show, I don't know, a few months back on NPR, and they were talking about how street living, you know, just cut your life expectancy down so much. And that's for a person who could be normally healthy and maybe in their 30s or 40s. But you getting into at that age, you know, your life expectancy is cut down even more.
Well, you know, one of the things I guess that's bothered me, at least what I've witnessed, is that there's an awful lot of vacant houses, not just in my neighborhood, but I'm driving around and I'll see houses that are boarded up and like that. And it seems to me that if we have a lack of affordable housing, we should not have boarded up houses.
I know that doesn't seem to make sense, does it?
No.
So I know, I didn't realize how many questionnaires from how many different groups I was going to get when I signed up to run for office. But there are many, and but many of them ask the same questions, and they talk about the homeless problem and what you would do to solve that. And you know, I'm not an expert in that, but I know one of the things that I had said was, or made the point that you just did, was that there are so many homes out there that are still boarded up that we've had from the economic recession that we still have not recovered from. And yet we have all these homeless folks. And it seemed to me there should be some creative solutions to marry up those people who are homeless with those homes that are out there that are just sitting there vacant. And they're wasting away, and with someone in the property, that would seem that you could get a win-win out of that. You could take care of the property as well as take care of the people at the same time.
Or something along the lines of maybe having low interest rates to get those properties back in functional condition. And, you know, if people aren't willing to do that, maybe they should think about escalating the property taxes on these vacant homes. But I mean, that's not a particular policy. It's just that I just feel very frustrated seeing so many vacant homes when we have so many homeless people.
No, I agree with you. I just think it doesn't make any sense. And I was, a few weeks ago, I was participating in an event sponsored by the League of Oregon Cities. And one of the big pushes that they wanted to bring to our attention as candidates for state representative was that they wanted more self-determination as communities. And if they wanted to be able to raise their property taxes beyond certain limits, they should be able to do that. And I completely agree. And I'm one of those people, I'm a former naval officer, and I really believe in solving problems down at the deck plate level and not having them elevate up to the captain. By that time, I think a lot of times that's too late anyway. So, yeah, I think, and I've said this in response to other questions about, let's drive it back down onto the communities, because they really can address those problems, I think, better because they're closer to them. They know what they have available. They know what their needs are, and then we in state government can help support them with their boots on the ground and just giving them the kind of resources that they need, or in sometimes just getting out of their way. So.
Yeah. One of the things, too, that I've noticed with a lot of cities, and it's relevant to, say, Salem, is the fact that the city is really strapped for funds. Mm-hmm. That they don't really, they cut back on maintenance, and anybody that's walked here in Salem on the sidewalks realizes that there's a problem with sidewalks. A lot of times there's various streets that have problems that aren't being maintained. And at the same time, they're trying to build new infrastructure when they can't even maintain what they have. And I think it's created almost like a treadmill effect, where they can't really get ahead and they got to keep running just to kind of stay even, and they're not even staying even now. And this has been going on for like 20 years, and I think that's something statewide that has been going on that needs to be addressed by, you know, state representatives and state senators.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think that's an issue that was brought up by both, you know, more urban and rural communities, saying that's an issue for them. While I think the state needs to support them in those endeavors, largely I think those are issues better addressed by someone that's a city council person or a county commissioner maybe than a state representative. But certainly the support that we can offer them from the state should be there. But I can't articulate it as well as they can their own urban needs. Right. I will say, though, that one of the big issues that came up was transportation and transportation projects. And anyone living in Salem understands the fact that, you know, it's hard to find a good road to go down anymore. They're doing, and to their credit, they're doing a lot of good road work that needs to be done, but there's a lot more to do, and it's hard to get around. And so people were trying to come up with, I mean, obviously they want to try and complete projects. That was one of the priorities, projects that have not been finished, so those don't deteriorate and you haven't just wasted funds on those kind of things, and finish those off. One of the candidates, and I can't recall who that was, but had formerly worked for ODOT, and said it used to be that they would go out and they would build in anticipation of growth, so that they would build a bridge that might be the most expensive part of the project, but they would build it to accommodate, say, 6 lanes instead of 4 that they were currently working on, so that when time came to expand, you know, or 4 lanes instead of 2. But now we just build to meet the need of the moment, and by the time that gets met anymore, it's like that's already gone past. And now in order to, you've got to expand again and spend even more money to make that happen. So I think you've got to be forward thinking in a lot of that. It might cost a little more money now, but down the road, you know, that's really going to pay off, and down the road is not a pun. But one of the things too that I had offered during our discussion was, whenever you are driving up to Portland, for instance, you'll discover oftentimes it's just a parking lot at certain points of the day, and a lot of that's a lot of heavy truck traffic and whatnot. So one of the things that I had proposed, and again, this isn't my area of expertise, but if we could get a lot of that truck traffic off the road by providing maybe incentives for rail that might help with some of those transportation infrastructure needs, that could benefit, you know, everyone, just cutting down the amount of traffic and the wear and tear on the roads and saving money in that way, you know.
Well, yeah, the trucks do cause a lot of wear and tear on the roads.
They do. They
And
do.
I just remember when I was a kid, I'd go to my grandmother's farm up in New Hampshire, and they had a law that the trucks couldn't cross the New Hampshire line until sundown. So, but I mean, it was very easy driving around because all you were dealing with were cars. And I noticed today when I was driving through town that there were a lot of big trucks, and it takes them a long time to get going and maneuver sometimes. So that is a problem. But I don't know if they'll ever go back to, well, you can't drive, semis through town until sundown.
Well, and again, my point there was mostly for trying to free up something like the I-5 traffic. But once you get in town, that's another story. There's no way you can't use rail to do that, and you've got to deal with that. One of the the city is dealing with now is I know when I'm driving home, there's various new operations that are opening up, which is a good sign of economic growth, but it's added a lot of truck traffic in those areas. And so I know the needs for the city are going to be even more prevalent to expand the roads to deal with even more truck traffic. So
one of the things that we haven't discussed is exactly where your district is, and District 19 is your district. So maybe you could describe the district.
Sure. So it's kind of a mixed district, kind of urban, rural. It's South Salem, and like south of around Fairview, South Salem High School for those folks that are out there, generally in that vicinity, south of that, out towards down to Almsville and Turner, and then going east, east of Cordon Road, and for the viewers who know where those are, and going all the way up to North Salem that way. So a lot of unincorporated area out in the unincorporated rural area that direction, plus South Salem and Almsville and Turner.
Okay. And so are there particular issues that confront that district that you think need to be addressed?
I don't know if our district has particular issues that are unique to it other than the issues confronted by the rest of the state. Like I said, it's kind of a mixed area with an urban area and a rural area. There's a number of wineries in my district. Being a graduate of UC Davis, I'm a big fan of that. So, but I mean, we're all struggling with the issue of graduation rates. We all struggle with the issues of in our own area, in our own communities, the food insecurity issues, the food and nutritional needs of our students, and from a state perspective, like I've said, the ethics issues that dog us, impact everyone, and and just overall, I think just like state spending issues. One thing I've said that in order to address the problems that come up, and people have asked me, as well as the other candidates, what are you going to do about overcrowding in the classrooms, or what about transportation infrastructure? Well, the bottom line of that is money. I mean, I can't, and no one I know of can make those class sizes any smaller without having more teachers. And in order to get more teachers, you've got to have more revenue. So we've got to be able to roll up our sleeves and find that kind of revenue. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that we're fiscally responsible. And I will use the examples of what happened with Cover Oregon, which I think was a major embarrassment. And I think with what happened with the Columbia River crossing, I'm not saying that a new bridge isn't needed at some point there, but just when the state of Washington decided to back out of that conversation, 90 legislators should have stood up and said, we're done, instead of trying to muddle forward and wasting more time and more money to try and build a bridge that you can only build halfway across the river if Washington doesn't want to play. So and I think a lot of, when I've been knocking on doors out there and talking to people about, about the issues that the state confronts, and they understand those. They understand the educational issues, and they understand many of the other issues that we've talked about, and they know that it takes money. But their big issue is they don't really trust the state legislature, and I think it's episodes like that
like
have caused them that have caused them to not have trust. And I get it. I absolutely. That's another reason I decided to run.
Yeah, it is. It is daunting too to try to get through some of the government ways of doing things. And Cover Oregon, and I have to admit, I worked in data processing, and there's a lot of overselling when it comes to those kinds of things. And you have to have somebody that's technologically intelligent enough to determine when they're
Yeah.
being fed a line. And I just gathered, from what I was reading, that that wasn't the case, that it was people that just didn't have the experience doing things. And, I've worked in that area for most all my adult life, basically, until I retired. And I just find that that's something you have to be real careful with, because people will try to oversell you systems that just they can't deliver.
Yeah, and I've seen that too, working in state government too. And I think the other issue with Cover Oregon too was just the politicizing of the issue as well. So, yeah, that's just ground in it. We don't need to.
Yeah,
we don't want to go there again. So
right, and well, one of the ballot initiatives, 97, is being, it's a proposal to get more taxes into the state of Oregon. And so what's your position on that?
Well, and I have been, since it was IP 28 and now ballot measure 97, I've been a supporter of ballot measure 97 because I think we need the revenue. I've been talking, I know I've been interviewed on some other shows as well, and I've said, ballot measure 97 can generate a lot of revenue that can address the state's needs, and I think in a relatively fair way. I think there's some issues about it that are going to have to be addressed because there's going to be some fallout on some folks that I think that the legislature is going to have to tighten up. But by and large, I think it's something that we need to have happen. Again, I've talked to voters out there in the district, and they're of the same mindset. Again, it comes down to the big problem they have is like, well, I really don't want to write a big check to legislators I don't trust and what they'll do with the money. It really does come back to that. And that's unfortunate because really when you look at a state legislature, like I'm on a service district board, and our two big tasks are setting policy and setting budgets. And if you look at the legislature, their big thing is, the writing laws and setting budgets out there. And if people aren't trusting you with handling the money, wow, it's almost like, why are you there? And you see that a lot of times because, to address issues, it goes off to a ballot measure for the people to do because just Salem isn't getting it done. And that's one thing that I think needs to happen inside those walls over there is that, both sides need to come together and say, okay, let's put our differences aside here for the good of the state and come up with some compromises where we can, get the kind of revenue we need to address the kind of problems we have, because we have serious problems. I mean, people make fun of, the Mississippis and the Alabamas, and in a number of instances, we score worse in many areas than those states do, and that's kind of a statewide embarrassment. It is, really.
Yeah. So how do you see yourself as being able to work with the other side?
Well, like I said, I've been on the, I've worked with Marion Polk Food Chair. I chaired their marketing campaign when they wanted to get a new facility. So I worked with a number of people there who wanted to address the issue of hunger, and it didn't matter what political persuasion they were. You worked together to solve that problem. And I think that's the way you have to do it. Same thing on the Willamette Education Service District Board. There's 9 board members on that board, all really good people and all people dedicated to making education better in this community. And we've done a really good job there. There's a couple of people on that board that are very conservative. I know one of my friends there, my friend Phil Fry, who when I was running, found out that I was running, we were sitting together one day and he pulled out his checkbook and he handed me a check and he goes, "This is from a very conservative Republican." And the fact is that, people have gotten to know me over time, know that, I am not about being of a political persuasion of a certain mindset. I like being around people who are different types of thinkers, come to things from a different directions and come up with, a lot of times, you'll see what you think might be a great answer and then someone will come up with something else. You go, that's an even better idea.
Or maybe they'll bring up a point that you hadn't thought about.
Exactly.
And that's part of having relations with various people so that you can get a lot of input into making your decisions and maybe improve whatever legislation you're trying to get through.
That's exactly right. And I use that example because on that board, we went through some very difficult times. I know when I got on that board about 10 years ago, I'd been there for a couple of years when, you know, everything blew up. And it was like, oh my gosh. And so found out that there was a deal making that was not happening, that was unknown to the board, and there was a lot of discontent. And so we wound up having to fire our superintendent, and lawsuits, and everything played out in the press too. That makes it very difficult. And there were lots of long nights. We put in, oh my God, many, many hours. But people, you know, rolled up their sleeves. And these are volunteer, we're volunteer members of the community. We don't get paid for doing any of this stuff. But over time, you know, we put in the time, and hired a great superintendent and administrative staff. And the staff at the Willamette Education Service District, I cannot commend them enough for what they went through and to pull us up. And our last customer service survey, we got, because we support 21 school districts in Marion, Polk, and Yamhill County, and it came back that we got a satisfactory rating of 98% for the services we provided, and a customer service rating of 100%. Now, I'll challenge any organization out there to get those kind of results back. And so for what people may think of that they know of the Willamette Education Service District, it's been a great turnaround story. And it's been a board, it's been the administration, and it's been the classified and licensed staff there that have all come together to do that. And again, the focal point is on taking care of the families and the children that we are there to represent. And when you stick to the mission, things take care of themselves, really. You don't get into these little, you know, I'm going to go over here and you're going to go over there. No, no, no. We're going to make this better for everybody involved. And it's been great. And I think I can bring that kind of experience, real hardcore experience, to the legislature.
And I guess what you're talking about is there's problems. Let's figure out how to solve them. Not like what's in it from my particular point of view. It's like, let's take care of this problem.
Exactly. And if you're there to solve the problem and you're not there to grandstand, you know, I think that's what's really nice. And, you know, I've heard other folks talk about some of the issues like with education, say, you know, well, we've had a committee hearing and we're going to do this, and then we're going to do some great things. And I'm thinking, you know what? I've been around people who've done great things. There are people in this community, there are people in this state, educators who know what needs to be done. And they need the kind of resources and support to get it done. So I don't want people to think that I'm going to go over to the legislature and sit in the House and come up with some brilliant idea. You know, our job there, as I see it, is to collaborate with one another to come up with the kind of resources that those folks need to get the job done.
Well, how can people get in touch with your campaign if they're interested in working?
Well, they can contact us through our website, which is trotthd.com, and I'm sorry, trotthd19.com,
right.
And left out the critical number there. So, yeah, get across to us that way. So.
Okay. Well, Larry, I want to thank you for coming in and joining us, and thank you for watching the Valley View, and join us next time.